Okay, it's telling us we're live. Took a little while to connect in. Good to see you all joining in the chat this morning, or this morning on my side of the world. I hope this finds you all well, and maybe just before we get too far into it, if you could let me know, give me a thumbs up if the sound and visuals are good for you. Nice to see lots of people, Michael and Lana. Great that you're joining in. Lots of people from different parts of the States. Thanks for the thumbs up, the visuals and the sound. People from Aussie and New Zealand, UK, Europe. It's always so wonderful just to feel this connection, through this mystery of cyberspace, mystery of the World Wide Web. But perhaps it's just showing us of a deeper connection that's always there, but wonderful to feel it so manifest in this way. Even though I can't see you, I see your little icons and little emojis, little messages, and knowing that there's people tuning in from all parts of the world is really great. So perhaps a few words to reflect upon before we head into the meditation while people are joining in. And I don't know what that would be. I have no idea. In this tradition, I have nothing pre-prepared, nothing that I feel like I need to say. But to speak from the place of here and now. I did actually, when I was looking through the chat, just glimpse someone's very first question. Actually, if you were to choose one best practice, what would that be? That's a very evocative question, isn't it? What would that be? But the first thing that came to mind was be here now. Something that cuts across traditions, language, the variety of approaches to awakening. Be here now is really, summarizes things quite well, summarizes the heart of the pointings, the wise pointings of the masters. Be here now. And I may have mentioned it some time ago, perhaps in an interview somewhere, but I remember when I was 17 at art school, I was living on campus, interstate, and the spiritual search, the existential inquiry was leading in different ways. And I came across a book. This would have been in the 80s, would have been 1980. Came across this purple book called Be Here Now by Ram Dass. Probably fresh back from India at the time. It was definitely, I don't know how many years it had already been published by then, but it was definitely something of a child of the 60s and 70s, this book. So it was, I got a lot out of that book, but, that be here now, and perhaps all spiritual teachers have said it in different ways, in very succinct language. Whatever's happening, wherever you are, however things may be, no matter what conditions we may be facing, be here now is the essence of instruction and the portal for awakening and of awakening. So that's my take. Try not to say too much about it because it speaks a lot from itself, for itself. Okay. Let's get ready for the meditation then. Coming from that very statement and sentiment, be here now. It's like wherever you find yourself, however you find yourself right now, no matter how messy or confused the mind appears, is experienced, no matter how messy or confused it appears to be out there, no matter how bad or good you feel physically, mentally, emotionally, it's just this way in this moment. Can we open to that? Can we be here now with things as they are? What does that suggestion do? If you allowed yourself just to rest into that and inquire into that opening, it is an opening, perhaps a moment of resting out of the push-pull, the wanting, not wanting, resisting, straining, efforting, or fixating, obsessing, whatever the habitual movement of the mind. There's a possibility always to rest out of that. So these words, these suggestion, be here now. Here now. The ever present, timeless present. Always here now. So opening, it opens the mind into the non-grasping attitude, the receptive attitude, the non-fixating, the living, actually, the being, without knowing what's going to come next. But you can know for yourself in that moment of opening, letting the mind open with the suggestion, be here now, how that feels. It can allow this relaxation, resting, even just for a moment, you might sense it. That's the path. So simple, so direct, so real, so accessible. The only problem is we forget that possibility. So meditation is about remembering that possibility and learning to open and rest into that openness. So whether you prefer to have eyes open or closed, What is it to rest into here now? Just hold that inquiry for a moment or two. So it allows us to come into touch with our physical beingness more directly. For a moment, we allow the mind to be open and receptive rather than chasing down ideas. So there you can connect with your breath and body sensations and recognize that they can help to help ground the mental energy that will soon reassert itself because it's such a strong habitual tendency of the mind. So connecting, feeling the in-breath and out-breath is an anchor line to this portal of here and now. So we can engage that if that feels helpful. And for most people, the emergence of thoughts and memories will make itself known as we connect with this present experience of being. So we just recognize what that is. The emergence of mental energy, the emergence of thought constructs. Just simply see it for what it is. It's neither bad nor good. It's just the conditioning of the mind. But when we recognize it, when we're here and now with it, really present with it, really look directly at that thought or memory or mental confusion. What happens there? It opens out again. The mind opens out again with the looking, the present moment, awareness, fully awake. So we can use this phrase if it's helpful. be here now, not as a whip or an order, as a suggestion, an inquiry, a gentle nudge to awaken. And stay connected as much as you can with the feeling of the breath and the body, like an anchor or a little boat on the ocean. Just helps you stay present. Attention is used to having something to connect with, an object. So we give it this present feeling of breath, sensation. Otherwise, it'll just run with plans and thoughts and memories, fantasies. It's looking for somewhere to settle. But it turns out it mostly ends up on that hamster wheel with no brake. But here, now, is the Dharma of stopping, of relaxing, of resting out. And we tune in to what that feels like, the consequence of that within the body-mind. It's quite beautiful. Open, spacious, aware, receptive. Neither holding on to any pleasant feelings, nor resisting, pushing away any unpleasant feelings, if they arise. This is just the Dharma of here and now, things as they are. As far as possible, just staying with this openness of mind, relying, if you need to, on the connection with breath and body, or another object of meditation, just to stay connected at this point. Relaxing out of the tendency to resist, to judge, to search, to strive. It's facing directly into the felt experience of not knowing. This is an irony. I mean, not knowing with ideas, concepts, not labeling, not trying to fix reality in one way or another. But that openness of mind, there's a direct, subtle knowing and awareness without fixating, without conceiving. We directly know the feelings of the body and the breath. Directly know various dharmas as they arise. Mental movement, the appearance of a memory, the rise and fall of sensations. The habitual tendency of the mind to want to plan and conceive, to know intellectually something. But all of this is possible to observe as impulses of body, mind that arise and pass. And we know that directly without conceiving. That's just the way it is. So we learn to let the mind become familiar with resting into here and now, relaxing out of habitual tendencies to conceive, or at least to run after mental constructs. Relaxing more and more around whatever's happening, whilst staying bright and awake. And the meditation will take its own course as these factors become balanced. Important to remember that we're not trying to stop thinking because thoughts just appear, but we want to wake up to thinking, be aware when it's occurring. And it stops by itself with that wakefulness, that seeing. Now you might meet the tendency to, the mind wants to close against that edge of not knowing. It's quite a challenge to the mind that's conditioned to think and ponder and internalize so much. Quite a challenge for it to remain open. So this is one of the edges, if you like, of practice. It's just observing that tendency to want to know something. I can't just be here forever not knowing. This is just the habit of the mind that wants to land on something, wants to take birth somewhere, become something, be something, get something, do something, have something, eat something, drink something, whatever, experience something. This is tremendous power of the conditioning. So it's not that we want to fight that. I'm going to stay open at all costs. I'm going to resist birth. It doesn't quite work that way either. It's finding that place of ease, seeing that that propulsion into the search to want to land somewhere is somewhat driven by a fear of not knowing. It's an egoic fear, actually. It seems to be the fear of the I. I have to be something. I have to be identifiable somehow. But actually, that positioning and direction is full of unseen dukkha, pain, suffering. But it happens. That's the tendency of the mind. So when we see that and know that, the very seeing and knowing undermines the ignorance there, the unclarity there. And then we start to see we have the capacity to trust in this openness of being more and more. We learn to tolerate that feeling of uncertainty, emotional uncertainty. Make friends with the nature of impermanence and change. It's opening into the territory of infinite possibility rather than finite trajectories. So it's here that we feel we can experience the finite, conceptually constructed identities and projections just melt and fade, disappear. They never really were who and what you are, or truly representative of how things are. And so we can taste the freedom from those restrictions. So as we bring this meditation to a close, wherever you find yourself internally, mentally, physically, emotionally, psychologically, just embracing the conditions as they are in this moment. Full acceptance with love and compassion. And letting it all go. Letting it be free. Letting everything be free. And in your own time, when you feel ready, come back into this shared space of connection, and we can have some more discussion as I respond to questions in the chat. Okay, so feel free. Hopefully Jayasara has opened the chat so people can pop in their questions if they have any. There's usually at least a few questions, and as Jayasara mentioned last week, or sorry, a few weeks ago, that it's a little bit easier for us to to find the questions if there's not too much sharing of comments in between on the chats, because we do lose our way when a lot of questions come in and other comments as well, and the chat rolls down a fair bit. Okay, I'm just scrolling back through the chat and see what I've missed in terms of questions. And okay. So here's Niall's question, I think. I've lessened my fear of death by recognizing that my day-long psychological continuity dies every night and is reborn slightly differently every morning. Does my consciousness actually die multiple times during the day? But it's simply too subtle for me to notice at this point in my practice. Well, when we're talking about things like, well, when we talk about anything actually, but particularly the word consciousness, we have to first define what we mean by that word, because it can be extremely misleading for people if we have different assumptions. We'll be talking at different levels. So defining that can be a little bit hard in this kind of forum, but I will just say, in terms of consciousness, as we talk about it in terms of the Buddha's use of vijnana, Vinana. The Buddha always talked about vijnana in a meditative sense as something that can be observed to arise and cease moment by moment, in fact, because vijnana as a khanda or aggregate of existence, an aggregate of mind, like everything else, such as the body, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness or sense consciousness. It's arising and ceasing. You could say at a quantum level, if you like, or maybe just subatomic level, appearing and disappearing regularly. That's its nature, because in this way of viewing consciousness, or to be specific, sense consciousness, the Buddha is pointing out the appearance of consciousness through the eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. That this type of sense consciousness is dependent and relates to the objects of the senses. So we have a moment of seeing consciousness when my eyes actually meet a form. Let's say in this room, I'm looking at the heater. There's a moment of cognition, of seeing. Or hearing, when you hear the birds waking up in this early morning, as long as there's the object of sound to be heard and your sense object connects with it and consciousness enters the field through cognition, there's a recognition, bird, or at least sound or hearing. Same with tasting, touching, textures, physical sensations, smelling. So seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and thinking, mind as the sixth sense base. Its objects are thoughts or ideas or any of the other phenomena, that come into its range. Like the other sense impressions of hearing, seeing, they're taken up by the mind as mental objects. But this is happening very, very fast, moment by moment, very less than a split second. You could probably get an accurate kind of measurement according to physics, in terms of the possibility of how fast this kind of sense consciousness or sense cognition is occurring. But what the Buddha wanted us to know is that it's a dependently arisen conditioned phenomena, and it can be observed to arise and cease. Often it becomes more easy to observe in meditation, when there's a bit more mindfulness and stillness and concentration. Actually, really the moment or the timeless present really opens up and sense impressions appear to slow down. So you really see the finiteness of these moments of cognition. But generally, they're moving so fast, and it seems that we weave a sense of identity through our life experience. We weave a sense of identity, a sense of continuity as a something experiencing all this, a fixed identity experiencing all this change. So the insight that can arise is that rather these things appear and disappear, but there's no fixed identity in them. They are experienced and they're perhaps karmically produced to at least some degree or other, if not fully. That's somewhat debatable. Some will say 100% karmically produced. But nevertheless, they appear and disappear. And the Buddha didn't want us didn't say we needed to work out all the different factors of this. We just had to become clear or see clearly that these things arise and cease, just like physical sensations, perceptions, which are labels, memories, mental images, and sankharas, thoughts, cognition. These things are arising and ceasing, and together they're related regularly. So they're in one sense we could say there's a continuity there. This is, of course, they're in association. They arise and cease in dependence on one another, but actually they can cease in your meditative experience. The arising and ceasing of those aggregates can ease out and actually disappear for a time. And the insight that arises there is that those appearances are conditioned, but they're not who and what you are, because there's that which knows them to be as they are. And that's what I was trying to tease out in the meditation. There is that direct knowing that's non-conceptual, that doesn't rely on words or concepts. It's just a direct knowing. One could almost say a timeless knowing, timeless awareness that the cognition of, say, impermanence is still a cognition that arises and ceases, but there's a direct knowing of things as they are, which doesn't rely on cognition. So this insight clarifies and cuts through to some degree or other that identification with these changing conditions, with these changing experience of sense consciousness, of body, of feeling, memory, etc. So in one sense now your question, that there's some truth to that. It does that subtle sense consciousness is appearing and disappearing throughout the day, throughout the life, throughout every moment. That's the cycle of mental and physical existence, mind and matter. So it's not just each morning and each night that it begins anew and ends, but nevertheless you really are on the right track, because it appears that, okay, it's a whole new fresh day, a new psychological start, and say by the end of the day, psychological death. That's one way we can certainly contemplate beginnings and endings, and the birth of identity and the cessation of identity. But in fact, it's happening very fast. The Buddha actually had some interesting metaphors for these khandhas, that form, physical form or sensation, was like foam, the foam that appears on top of water. It's as flimsy as the foam that appears on moving water. Basically his metaphor is saying it's as insubstantial as that. And feeling is like the bubble that appears in a puddle when a drop of, say, rainwater hits the puddle and a bubble pops up. Feeling tones of pleasure or pain are as momentary and fragile as that, as fleeting as that. Perception, he compared to a mirage in the desert. So images that arise in the mind, or learned labels, heater, chair, computer, me, you, this, that. These are learned labels. So they can give the impression that something is really there when the mind doesn't yet understand the construction of, mental constructs and the impressions they create. So it's like a mirage. It appears that there's something there, like a lake in the distance in the desert. And then particularly if you really want water, you're pretty invested in that. So it appears real, but perception is like a mirage. It's as if something there, but it really isn't in the way you think it is. Again, insubstantiality, not self-nature. He compared sankhara, or mental formations, to a coreless plantain stem, which is like a banana tree. Apparently, I've never done it myself, but if you cut a banana tree, it's quite coreless. You don't find heartwood like in other trees that the stems go up, but it's coreless. So it has no center, no real substance in the center. These are sankharas, or thoughts, or mental formations. And sense consciousness, as the fifth khandha, he compared to a magician's trick, a conjurer's trick, in the sense that the sleight of hand, it's moving so fast, it feels like there is something real there and happening. In reality, there is this, but actually, in reality, it's a magician's trick, sleight of hand, or doing something out of sight while the mind is focused here. So these are really good metaphors, but they're all pointing basically to the insubstantiality of what we think is a really solid, fixed thing, and that we tend to identify with as me being this, or having this, or owning this, and it's very solid, fixed, and real. And then in that illusion, we don't see its fabricated nature, its insubstantial nature, its ever-changing nature, always conditioned. And our modern science helps us understand this, in that when we look at things through the microscope, if I were to look at this chair that my computer's resting on through the microscope, it looks pretty solid and static. But if I would look at it under a microscope, you'd see all sorts of moving parts. Actually, it's not one solid thing, and yet it appears to be so. So this is the same kind of science of the Buddha that was discovered within using the microscope of awareness itself on this body-mind, on reality itself. So a very long answer there, but I hope that it's helpful and clarifying, not just for yourself now, but for others too. Okay. Scroll down to find if there's other questions. Oops. Okay. The chat has just jumped a few miles south. I'll just, as it does, come back up, stay in line with the questions. Oh, lots of questions. Okay, here we are. So Kim is saying, thank you, Ayya. What I've noticed is Buddhism is a bit anti-ambitious, meaning it teaches to be content and not attached to anything, in a sense. I struggle with that because I need to. Now, I'm not sure if there's any more to that question, which I know different parts of questions can be separated by quite a few other questions, but yes, it can sound like that, anti-ambitious, as you say, or some people will say it's very passive. Now, this is the meditation approach, because actually what we are attempting to do is to let go of that heavily conditioned and obsessive, goal-oriented striving to the future. And I mean, maybe your question came in before we ended the meditation or not, but that forward trajectory of the mind's mental energy, we call it becoming, the becoming energy is so strong. And it actually never allows us to rest. I mean, so many people will say, I wish there was just a button or a switch. I could just switch this mind off because it just never rests. And wouldn't it be great if there was, just to have that rest? That non-resting is that the intensity of that becoming energy. But the Buddha discovered it can be rested. And it doesn't necessarily undermine your capacity to achieve things. It might rearrange your priorities, and it probably should, but to discover that we don't have to be always in the stream of becoming is a revelation. And it is the place of peace. So if people are truly interested in peace and reality and truth, then discovering this possibility is at the heart of that. Like I was saying in the meditation, that it's not about forcefully trying to stop this energy, because that doesn't work. It's a different, that tends to be coming from an aversion or another kind of idea that we can stop it, or that it should be stopped, or that it's somehow not good, which are all different kinds of labels and judgments. But what we want to recognize is that when we wake up to what's happening, something altogether different happens. And that's the important thing, to be fully aware, to be fully awake, and not just drawn along in a stream of conditioned karmic tendencies, underlying tendencies, for better or for worse, but realize there is that possibility of fully awakening to that and the release from that. This is the whole trajectory. So our language, yes, indeed, might sound a bit anti-ambitious. It's not meant to be taken necessarily always from the meditative realm, the meditative instruction into daily life. We have to have some degree of goal orientation in the conventional world. We can't sit 24/7. Depends on your calling, however. There are those who have a calling more to be hermits or monastics, and those who have a calling to be more active in the world. But they're not they don't have to be mutually exclusive. But the languaging, I agree, can always sound a little bit to one side. But, the tremendous energy that can be released in the heart mind when you're able to relax out of that stream of becoming is huge. And it has a great potential for goodness in the world. That anti-ambitious thing that you point to, you say you struggle with that. And maybe that word struggle is more key to where you feel a bit stuck. You may be trying just to stop that forward moving energy. So I'm suggesting to really be aware of it when you feel it in the body mind, whether in your meditation or in your daily life, and take a few moments to just breathe with it. Can I breathe with this energy, this forward moving ambition? Can I be with it here and now, just for a few moments, and see what happens? Because even if for a moment suddenly the mind rests out of that, you will discover there's a greater and freer energy that can be moved with, that is not Well, let's just say it's freer, more free, and perhaps there's far more choice within that, less compelled and karmically driven, and more open and perhaps compassionate, wise even. So there's that to be explored. These are only words, we can use words in any way we want and make some things sound good and some things sound not good. All of it is to be discovered within. The words are just like coat hangers, they're just, you can use them in any way you want, but we're trying to point to something that can be recognized within for the sake of freedom. Is there a difference in Buddhism between attachment and clinging? Not necessarily. That they tend to be two different translations. So in Pali language, in the Pali scriptures, we have two words, tanha and upadana, and they're quite distinct things. One is tanha is often gets translated as craving, and then upadana as clinging or grasping. So they're two distinct limbs, if you like, but very much related. Craving, tanha, is the condition for the arising of clinging or grasping. Now, attachment is a more generalized term, and it could actually relate to both of these together, craving and clinging, because they often usually come together. But I find that within the Tibetan scenario, Tibetan Buddhist practice scenario, attachment usually gets used more for tanha, I think. That's how I hear it. Whereas in the Pali Buddhist circles, we might get more desire or craving. And clinging could be also interpreted as attachment, obviously, or grasping. You can take it that attachment and clinging can apply to both tanha, upadana, but more specifically the clinging, the upadana, which is the uptake of an aspect of experience where identification happens, or solidifying, reifying. And the subtle difference is it comes upon the craving or the seeking or the desiring that might just arise momentarily, like, I need something, like that, what I was talking about before, that tendency that the mind wants to land on something, give me something to define myself by, even if it's just something to do or something to eat. And then that energy, if not seen, will want to land somewhere or move towards something, an image, an idea, an actual bit of food or drink or whatever. And then the clinging is just that subtle step further of really, yes, this is, this is it, taking this up as that object of desire, almost taking it into myself, becoming me. There is identification and grasping and clinging to that, to the degree that which if it were to be, if someone would try to wrest that from your grip, you'd kind of, no. But clinging can also be equally aversive. It can create a bit of a, the craving rather can create is a craving, not just wanting something, but in the not wanting something. So there can similarly be that clinging and identification in a not wanting posturing, a resistance, the resistance of anger, that armoring that can happen at times if we feel angry or righteous, and there can be a clinging. There is a clinging within that. Okay. Do you leave behind an anchor at some point, breath or body, or would that make the mind wander too much? Well, yeah, so that's referring to the meditation instruction. First, we can rely on the anchor. This is called meditation with an object, to help with the stilling of the mind. So to help the mind relax out of the habitual mental energy, which is usually pretty well powered. We need something to rest attention on to help relax that. Okay. Coming back. But at some point within the meditation, when the mind does start to settle, meditation process, the meditation process progresses. Mindfulness becomes more subtle. The resting of the mind becomes more subtle. So mind will tend to take a more subtle object. So sometimes the breath even becomes so subtle, you don't even perceive it anymore. So at that point, mind will take a subtler object, maybe the feeling of spaciousness or awareness itself. It's usually some kind of subtle anchor, so to say. Or we can also say mind is just open without one particular object, but mindful of whatever appears and disappears. So in a way, it's found its own stability in the openness of awareness itself. And we call this a mind with, say, equanimity. So these different skillful factors of meditation kind of come into play in their own, on their own, in a way. That's how the Buddha talked about it. Yeah, so they are left behind at some point, but you don't try to make that happen. It will happen by itself within the meditation. So another question is, should one go into their emotions and explore them in order to be free of them, or cut off the connection from them? Both seem dangerous. Personally, I don't recommend cutting off connection from them. No, definitely not, because that's just an idea. And if we try to cut them off, they'll still operate beneath the surface of full consciousness, and your life will start to reflect that back to you in different ways. No, we have to learn to integrate the emotional life, the emotional experience. So whether that means at some point do we go into them and explore them in order to be free of them, if emotion is present, then there are different ways of inquiry we can engage in depending on how you are with that. Sometimes it's simply recognizing there is this emotion. The heart feels sad, or the heart feels joy. And we continue to breathe with that, and it is as it is. It appears, it manifests, it moves, it fades, it changes. But it may be that other emotions, there's anger present, or there's strong craving present, and that these are really troubling for you and you're struggling with them. If that's the experience, and then they do need to be inquired into and explored, because there's not enough understanding yet to just let them appear and disappear as they come and go on their own propensity. If they're getting stuck and seeming causing trouble, we need to inquire what's happening here. From the meditative point of view, we can inquire in different ways, and that just very much depends where you're at in your practice. So getting specific instructions for specific experiences with regard these emotions would be helpful. Can't really give an overall blanket, I've done a series of meditations which are up on our website for particularly challenging emotional territory, fear and desire, anger, anxiety, depression, and grief. So if you're interested, you can listen to those meditations. They're really designed for addressing the meditator who's experiencing that emotion currently. Yeah, and then, there's ways of working through all of that. So I hope that helps. That's the middle way between your two options there. And there's nothing dangerous about exploring emotions, inquiring, as long as it's done with kindness and compassion and wisdom. Yesterday, I heard someone describe they were a member of engaged Buddhism associated with Thich Nhat Hanh. And what form of Buddhism is your community? Okay. Well, my, say, root tradition is Thai forest tradition. Particularly my first training was in the tradition of Ajahn Chah and Ajahn Sumedho. So that's, in a way, my base training and root training and practice. But I also have many years' experience and practice within the Dzogchen teaching and way of practice. And through my years of practice have also learnt from many different traditions of Buddhism and also Advaita. So there's a degree of, let's say, for want of a better word or phrase, kind of cross-referencing there. So I hope that's helpful to clarify for you. How would you describe your practice? It's kind of quite a large open question, but I don't really know what to say. I mean, everything I say and teach, even that meditation, every meditation I give is a self-description of my practice, basically. I'm teaching you what I'm practicing. So all of that, everything that you ever hear me teach or speak is a description of my practice. Essentially, so many different ways you could drill it down into a few words, but even the way I opened today, be here now as the root instruction for entering the portal of awakening. For myself personally, in my life, awareness itself has been the deep theme in lay life as much as, and everyday life as much as monastic and meditative life. Thank you for your guidance, Ayya. Would you say that after your many years of practice that you reside in this open space of here and now awareness most of the time? That's my trajectory, if you like. It changes depending on what's going on. Am I in it most of the time? This is kind of relative, isn't it? It's a relative question. I'm certainly there much more than every bit of past you could go back to, I could compare it to and say, yeah, it's more than my perhaps every earlier point in time. But it's not all the time, because I have to engage in quite a few practical things as well, like everyone, maintenance and planning and going here, going there, responding to unexpected situations. illness. I have a fair bit of that going on. So the times that seem less open and aware and more, I wouldn't say frenzied, but it has more momentum and not really resting in the here and now, those times are, I really wake up. I want to wake up in those times. They're like the challenge. And, life without challenge or growing edge could become pretty dead. So it's a growing edge, what appears to challenge us in our life, in whatever way, if we see that as an opportunity for inquiry. So this is really another way you can say this is the arising of dukkha, or the arising of stress in some form. Then that's an invitation to recognize that's happening, to be really present with that in order to see clearly, to wake up there. And the degree to which we can is variable, and it's not something I can know of my capacity before a challenge arises. Sometimes I might feel like I have more resilience with illness than at other times. Some days we feel we have a shorter span of patience than other days. Some days it feels like I could be endlessly patient with things not going the way I thought they would. And other days it's like, very short span of patience or tolerance. But that may depend on so many things, like not getting a good sleep, feeling pain, not digesting well, feeling tired, whatever, So it's just being open to experience as it is. And it's interesting, I've heard of a couple of instances where people have had dramatic awakening experiences, and in this case, just two instances of lay teachers, and they've gone beyond fear. That was their experience of having gone beyond fear and just completely open and in flow for many, many years. And then at some point, fear reemerges. And it really takes them by surprise. They thought they'd gone beyond that. And they don't necessarily know that what's happening yet. So that's a new edge of inquiry. Or maybe something else that emerges, because some things can lurk in the shadows for a long time. And if you're not really wise to watching the mind, and if you've similarly come into a privileged position of teacher or whatever, you may not see certain things until it, excuse the rhetoric, comes up and bites you in the bum, or bites someone else in the bum if it's anger or something else that you haven't seen. So we have to be ever ready to, ideally, to meet whatever new challenges appear. Because, there's a subtle egoic identity that, wants to think that they're beyond that now. Something that's achieved something. So these challenges are really wonderful growing edges, and not necessarily, you don't necessarily have to see them as challenges to be overcome, but to be something that awakens you. Yeah. So short answer. There some of the time, sometimes it seems like more than not, and other times not. Dear nuns, thank you so much for your videos. The readings of different scriptures and texts have given me a great sense of joy and freedom. Vedanta and Buddhism, the paths are so beautiful. Very good. So my father was diagnosed with cancer. Is praying for healing appropriate, or is surrendering to the situation more important than praying? You can do both. I mean, surrendering to the situation doesn't mean that all hope, for want of a better word, is lost. or that nothing's going to change, or that we're all just victims of this situation and have to kind of bear with it. Surrendering, is a kind of acceptance of, oh yes, this is how it is now. Now, it can really hit us hard. I remember when my father was diagnosed many years ago when I was a young nun with a degenerative disease, and it really bowled me over. He was quite young and I was still pretty young, and had a big impact. So my dad with that, was going to put him into a wheelchair and kill him eventually. So it can sometimes take us a lot to really adapt to the new situation. There can be grief and resistance and denial and anger and all of that within there. So learning as a gradual opening to accept the situation. Yes, this is the way it is. We're all in the same boat. Having been born, we're vulnerable to injury, accident, illness, disease, aging, and death. All of us, we're all in the same boat. It just happens to each of us at slightly different times and slightly different ways. So when it comes close to home, it can be an awakening experience, but adapting to that awakening can take some time. So acceptance of the situation doesn't mean that we don't pray for healing. There's many people, in Buddhist monasteries, you'll hear the list of the sick and the unwell and the dying that we're praying for. Our prayers are more blessing chants, asking for the blessings of the Buddha, Dharma, Sangha, for their well-being, for their peace, for their well-being on all levels. Not necessarily that they, would be ridiculous to say, may they. I mean, in some cases, yes, people do recover from cancer. So we can pray in that sense for their healing, but it's beyond our control. We have well-wishing, may you be well. Ram Dass speaks to this beautifully. As you know, Ram Dass, having been a spiritual teacher for many years, suffered a very debilitating stroke. And then he had to rehabilitate and, live with the restrictions that brought. But he had tremendous deepening of wisdom through that. And he talks of, I might not get it right semantically, but he makes a difference between something like the words between healing and recovering. So recovering might mean recovering your previous state, physical state. But healing doesn't necessarily mean recovering a previous state that we call wellness. Healing is a holistic experience and ultimately a healing of the heart and mind, whether or not we recover wellness of body. And none of us are going to outrun aging and death. So really the true aim is a healing of heart and mind. With the heart and mind healed, in fact, the Buddha points to the overcoming aging and death, not on the physical level, but on the level of the mind, of the heart, that no longer dies or thinks of itself as dying or ailing with the body. The body is an expression of past karma, or even just my breakfast this morning, our breakfast, our dinner, everything we feed the body. But healing is not taking the body beyond aging and death. Healing is the mind going beyond aging and death. I'll leave that with you. Why is waking reality so solid? Is it? I'm so confused. How can we enter a more malleable state of mind intentionally instead of only automatically during sleep or in a hazy fashion in meditation? Well, gosh, there's lots within that. First of all, your assumption, why is waking reality so solid? That requires inquiry. You might need to get a microscope and really look, see if you can find that solid reality in the things that you think are solid. Nevertheless, we perceive them as solid. I perceive this chair as solid, this body as relatively solid. But we know that this body is more fluid and spacious than solid. If we were to, I don't know the exact percentages, but if we were to, crunch all the matter, the solid matter in this body, it would be far, far less than the water content or even the space content. So it appears that way. And it appears that way merely to the sense of touch, And we kind of extrapolate that through the sense of vision. If I touch it and it feels solid when I see it, I think I'm seeing something solid and I relate to it as solid. But, it's all changing, going through this cycle of change, subatomic level, everything, nothing will stay the same. Nothing is staying the same moment to moment. So that's the first thing to challenge. And I appreciate it's confusing because, yes, our mind is strongly conditioned to see things in a certain way. This is our human conditioning. If we were, say, a butterfly or a grub or some other life form, we may perceive things quite differently, perceive the formations of earth, water, fire, air, and space quite differently. Hard to know. So just broadening your mind, broadening your way of thinking, challenging this sense of solidity. When you say, instead of only seeing it in a hazy fashion in meditation, well, hazy might be a descriptor of your meditation at this point. But at some point, hazy isn't there. There can be bright clarity, bright clarity. And you see the non-solidity of things internally very clearly. Nevertheless, these teachings, they're not to be believed. They're just pointings for you to inquire. Now, we do accept a conventional reality. I get into the car in the morning if I have to go into town. I'm relying on the solidity of that car to travel this body to another location. So relatively speaking, there's solid objects. There's watery objects. I don't want to drive the car into a river, so I can discern clearly the solidity of the road as opposed to the fluidity of the river running by it. Stay on the road. So we've got these conventions and everyday wisdom. We don't have to disperse them, but we come to see their relative nature. This can't be described. It's just a process of meditation, and not even meditation. So, you can have insight just through contemplating things or bringing the mind. If you're interested in something and it sounds like you're interested in this territory, just use this question. Why is this seem so solid? And inquire into it in a way that you feel is meaningful. What is this experience of solidity? When we do meditations or explore what the elements are, only feels solid when you touch it with your hand, touch the body or touch the chair. And that's a moment of sense consciousness, of touch consciousness. Touching the chair, letting it go, touching it, letting it go. Just the moment of touch is that moment of sense contact where that sense of solidity appears. And then it ceases with the releasing of the touch, drawing your hand away. Just play with things like this till you get a sense of what is solidity. Is it a real thing? Is a solidity a real thing, or is it a sense experience, a feeling, a sensation of hardness, a sensation of weight, which is very momentary, and we interpret that sensation as solid, therefore we interpret it as real. This chair is more real than the space around it. No, space is just space. Form is form. Solidity, fluidity. I could touch this chair and be more discerning of the thermal quality of the heat between my skin and the fabric of the chair. Or be more aware of the quality of moisture if the hands are sweating a little. Or be more aware of the quality of space in the absence of touch as I move my hand away from the chair. All of these elements are in interaction together. And really it's only our concepts, our learned concepts and labels that draw it into some kind of projected cohesive reality. But that's a deep dive. So just work with the level that you're interested in and use those inquiries. So all I want is enlightenment. It's on my mind all day, every day. And yet I realize that that wanting is getting in the way of the relaxation I need to remember who I really am. Perfect. Good realization. You say, how does one go about it? Just that. And yet I realize that wanting is getting in the way of the relaxation I need to remember who I really am. Just recognize when that wanting is present. That's all you need to do. And in the seeing and the knowing, it'll drop away. In that moment, whether you're at work or at home, whether you're in activity or in stillness. But be there for that. That's the insubstantiality and impermanence of craving and wanting. It appears for a moment, but when you look directly at it, it goes. Or you can't find it, actually. But if you assume it to be real and its object, the object of your desire to be real, you will tend to get caught in a momentum of energy of searching, which is divided, which is separated from here and now, in fact. So just the seeing and the knowing, it drops by itself. And there you are, right there in that relaxation that you need to know who you really are. So, advice for not feeling sad. I will be moving with the beloved family dog and his friend. My son will be left behind. I know not to cling. I think this is half a question. I'm not sure where the other half has gone, but let's see if we can address that, which I've slightly lost again. Okay. Advice for not feeling sad. My advice is, if you feel sad, it's okay to feel it. There are situations where it feels sad, particularly in the loss of someone or something that we love, we have loved. So it's okay to feel sad. Again, like everything else, that sadness isn't super solid. It's an experience. It can be accepted. It's okay to feel it. It's not a problem in and of itself. We can awaken to it and awaken with it. There's a feeling of the heart, an emotion. It's an acknowledgement that there's change about to take place. You're moving, and your son is staying. So I'm not sure, obviously, of the wider situation. So actually, the not clinging, when you say, I know not to cling, that's not something that we force per se. It is, if you're not wanting to feel sad, the clinging is in the not wanting to feel sad. So when you open and say, it's okay to feel what I'm feeling, that's the not clinging. And then the feeling moves and disappears by itself in its own time. But if we feel sad and then it's okay to feel overwhelmed sometimes too, because we tend to resist the feeling of overwhelm so much. So it's really a constant awareness of when we're resisting, hanging on, or pushing away, and just softening, allowing a softening. Really, it's not you or some kind of agent doing it, but that wisdom recognizes there's some kind of stress involved here in the resisting the feeling of sadness, not wanting to feel sadness, not knowing what's going to happen, not knowing if this will overwhelm me. We just feel that whole territory, and it's okay. You can breathe with that. Ask yourself, can I breathe with this? It's okay to breathe with this. Things as they are. A whole melee of feelings. Because of this time of change, times of change, particularly in relation to family and loved ones and relationships, can bring up so much, because there's a lot of unknown in that as well. And also the letting go of the loved, if we're separating out to some degree, then it can bring with it also the fear of death and the unknowingness of change and the unknowingness within the experience of parting and death. But all of this is great Dharma. All of this is life to be felt, to be open to be experienced, yet not clung to. But we will experience clinging. That's not a problem. But if we awaken to it, if we're present with that, it can dissolve as well. It's the edge of the heart opening more and more, mind opening more and more. And there'll be some tears, there'll be some love, but often the tears can allow a moving on as well. There's a bit of a breakthrough, a relaxing into. So I hope that's helpful in some form. Jenny, is having a physical incarnation in a physical body beneficial in the accomplishment of spiritual awareness? In what way? What is the ending of a beneficial journey of this physical experience? So all that's pretty intellectualized. We do have a physical incarnation, that's just the way it is. So it can be helpful in waking up. That's where we're at. So we make the most of everything. Everything can be helpful in waking up. So it's not either or. It's not that we need to not have a physical body is a better option for waking up. Here we are. This is the way it is. So what is the ending of a beneficial journey of this physical experience? It's just, the ending of a physical experience is the ending of a physical experience. like I said saying in response to Niall's question early on, where we're experiencing physical experiences arising and ceasing all day, every day, innumerable times. The ending of this particular incarnation at death, whenever that may occur, is, I think, a profound doorway. I have no conscious memory of my past deaths or births. So, in a way, I could say my death in this life will be something that I haven't experienced before in this life. But I've had a few indications in my practice and in my life that even though we may fear different elements within that experience, the potential pain or potential confusion or potential fear, there's really nothing to be afraid of. It's all very natural. I can understand that physical pain, when it gets intense, is fearful. I've certainly been there. But we just develop the mind and the heart that can work with things as they are, when they are. That is the be here now mind. That's all we can do. But also many of the masters in different ways say that, or actually I was listening last night to Padmasambhava teaching, that even though it may appear that you change forms in terms of taking a new body if there is incarnation, really the mind, awareness itself, the transcendent knowing, is ever stable and never takes birth or dies. So that's a paraphrasing of what he said, but that's in essence what he was saying. So there's a possibility in this life for recognizing that stable Dharma, that deathless Dharma, the essence of your heart, the Buddha nature, that is ever and always beyond birth and death, even though it may appear, this body may appear, or a new body may appear, and this body may disappear. So there we go. Dear Jitindriya, how do you integrate making art as a form of inquiry and meditative expression? I'm an artist myself, and I'd love to hear your perspective on this. I don't do a lot of art myself anymore, but the integration is just, art making is a contemplation, and for me there was a lot of observation. So the power of observation in any situation, whether it's in the service of making art or in meditation or in daily mindfulness, inquiry. The mind of observation is open, it's present, it's wakeful. There's a certain collectedness and focus to it, and it can bring about an increasing clarity. So all of these things just mentioned are expressions of the 5 spiritual faculties. The Buddha calls them saddha, virya, sati, samadhi, and panya, or faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. But when you bring that down to direct experience, faith or trust, saddha is like openness of mind. Energy is like wakefulness, present wakefulness. Mindfulness is presence, being with. Samadhi is a degree of stillness or collectedness, or you could say focus. And wisdom is clarity or insight, that kind of territory. So that's the integration is right there, really. I found as I meditated more, my creative energy kind of moved more into inquiry and I guess expressing through words rather than art making. Although I've done a fair bit of design work in my monastic career as well. Monastic career, what a funny word, what a funny phrase. In my monastic life, designing little kutis or different things. Can pranayama help release trauma from the nervous system? I think it can. I don't have a strict practice, any pointed practice of pranayama myself. Just mindfulness of breathing practice, which is the natural breath. It's not breath retention in any way or regulating the breath in any way. It's just observing the natural breath. Can also be helpful for releasing trauma and calming the nervous system. So Seraphim says there is a button, that is to turn off the mind, called attention. You just have to keep pushing and pushing it throughout the meditation session. So there you go. That's another take on stopping the mind. Yeah, is just keep bringing attention or to here and now, to what's happening, to the present meditation object, or just awareness itself. And that, I wouldn't call it a break so much, but it undermines the momentum and the avijja or ignorance that propels momentum oftentimes. Greetings, Ayya. I'm working on turning toward suffering, but often seek comfort outside. Any advice on staying present kindly when the mind wants to escape? So just to say that I've got a whole series of meditations that will help guide you through that territory on our website called Embodying Awareness and Kindness, I think. So please listen to those if you haven't already. Yeah, and we, sometimes we have to, depending on the kind of suffering that we're working with, we have to find, in one way of speaking, our level of tolerance and what's possible, because we don't want to re-traumatize our system. If at all possible, we want to be kind and gentle with ourselves. So finding a balance between, you say you often seek comfort outside. We do have to nurture the body-mind in a wise way, but it's always very situational as well. We have to know what's helpful and what's not helpful. Just be very gentle and kind and compassionate with yourself when you're working with this stuff. But also just to know when the mind is just habitually distracting out of fear or anxiety, and just gently seeing that, waking up to that and breathing with it. That's the practice, that's the process. So yes, someone's quoting the Beatles, nothing is real. There's so many different quotes we could bring out from pop culture and pop music, which are very relevant. So Alex says, some of Jayasara's readings of Ramana Maharshi translations have a strong language in rejecting thinking and thoughts. That seems to contradict the just resting and letting be. Yes, it does seem. Does that language actually help some people? I think it might, Alex. I think it can be helpful for some people and not helpful for others. And this is where each of us have to see language just for what it is in itself and what it triggers in us, because we each have slightly different conditioned patterns, and one particular word might trigger something in me that is not helpful, whereas for another it might be helpful. And that is not a constant. At other times it may be helpful. So everything's very relative in how we relate to it. So sometimes the strong language of Ramana or Nisargadatta as well, and just reject thinking, just be really strong with it, can be helpful. At other times, it can reinforce this sense of armoring against something and thinking, this is bad, this is wrong, this is right. To reject that. And these have certain effects on the psyche and the consciousness, and you've got to be aware of how is it affecting you in the short term and the long term. So, but really all of these pointings are meant ideally for the moment. Just reject the thought. It's like, don't get lost in the thought. See the thinking for what it is. My languaging has changed a lot from the traditional Buddhist languaging we've developed or we've inherited. And you could say this similarly for the Advaita language, because I see in myself the ill effect of making something bad and making something wrong. It seems to create a certain fear and resistance. And I have seen it does the same for many Westerners. Many Western educated people get stuck on black and white views of things. It should be this way, shouldn't be that way. Push this away, hang on to this. And it kind of becomes an instruction that is absolutized, and it's really not meant to be that. So how do we let go of thinking lightly when it appears in the present? What is the letting go? And I found the best way is just a direct inquiry into that. And Ramana can contradict himself and Nisargadatta sometimes within the same teaching, because language can do that. Ajahn Chah could do that. We all do that in some ways. So we have to take these pointers within their relative context. But coming back to the root of the Buddha's framework, if one pointer is creating stress in the moment, then that, whatever's happening there, is perhaps not helpful. If that inquiry is increasing a point of stress. Now, there'll be plenty of people who would argue that point with me, who are more ascetic and into more kill the kilesa kind of path. And you've got to be strong, unremitting, and push these things away. That just never worked for me. For some people, it may. For a time, they have to come around to a place of non-resistance and compassion eventually, but sometimes that maybe comes through in a deeper insight. So everyone is different. So I hope within some of what I've said there, Alex, you get my meaning, you get my drift. Really to see what's happening, how that's affecting the heart in the moment is the best kind of indicator that is this working or not working. It doesn't mean that every point of stress means it's not good, which means I just go with the flow of all my desires, kind of the path of least resistance. We have to be wiser than that. So it's anyway, I hope that's clarifying and not more confusing. You will see it in yourself when you look there. Yeah, so Carol is appreciating Mr. Winslow's comment on the button of attention. Someone discovered that 3 days ago, and when they meditated it says, for the first time I meditated truly non-dually. If it was truly non-dually, truly, there wouldn't be an I or a meditation. But maybe that's exactly where you were. I'm often stressed around others, whether or not I appear so, because I'm preoccupied with making them at ease, especially if they seem unhappy with me. But either way, advice on how to relax out of that. Yeah, so there's a certain conditioning factor for many of us and I relate to that too. My earlier conditioning is wanting to make others feel at ease and peaceful, because that creates less stress in the environment so that I can then feel more easeful and peaceful too. So perhaps if someone's unhappy in the environment, or whether with me or someone else, there's a fear or a potential threat, they could get angry at you. So these are psychological posturings in a way. So we need to be aware of what's underlying that stress of needing to make the other happy and okay. It's not that it's wrong, it's just that sometimes it is a posturing of fear. So we need to be conscious of that and to breathe with that if we uncover that that's the case. So we can learn how to relax on a deeper level when we're able to integrate that fear response. Yeah. So it's not then about relaxing others so that I can relax. It's about us just finding a deeper level of okayness, because that fear has now become more conscious and is integrating. And, on the other side of things, as a quality of compassion, it's okay to want to wish for others to feel easeful and at peace, and we can help them if appropriate in different ways, and even just by our own way of being at ease and at peace in not having that shadow of fear emerging can help the whole situation too. But then, if something erupts in an unpeaceful way, when things are fully conscious in our own psyche, we have the capacity to find some ballast and equanimity with that as well, and to respond skillfully when things are fully conscious. So someone's saying the rejecting thinking thoughts is more of a masculine approach energetically, of discipline and sharper focus, while resting out of it is a more open, receptive and softening feminine. Yes, we could say one's more masculine and one's more feminine according to the conditioning. And yet we have both of those capacities within us, most certainly, within each of us. Okay. Well, I think we're arriving towards the end of the questions. Just a few more before we finish up. Yes, in reality, there's nowhere to be except for here and now. There's always only here and now, regardless of what we think exactly. That's right. How do I know someone is supposed to stay in my life a bit longer? How do I not sabotage my relationships with people where I don't push them away unnecessarily? Well, you have to just look into your own psychology and see what the fear and desire is about. There's fear and desire operating there. it's not that we know if someone is supposed to stay in our lives a bit longer or not. How can we know that? How can anyone know that? Things happen as they do. There's no overarching truth in that kind of situation that it should or it shouldn't be. We just kind of work with the way things are. The way things play out is often due to everybody's different psychological posturings, and it's rarely, if ever, perfect. It's usually all pretty imperfect, and when it comes to relationships, it can often appear messy. So it's making peace with the way things are, but looking into your own psychological reactivity around fear and desire, wanting and not wanting. It's hard. It's hard when the heart's involved in relationship and there's attachment and various different strategies and projections being played out. But if you tune into those meditations that I mentioned on our website, you might find some guidance and some help to navigate that territory. So, last question, asking, what do you think about psychedelic substances as a gateway to meditation practice and awakening? As a monastic, I don't do psychedelic substances, and as part of my training, and even before when I wasn't a monastic, I wasn't necessarily that drawn to them myself. And for some people, it appears they can bring some measure of insight or seem to aid some spiritual understanding, but whether or not that is a lasting insight or aid or reality, what appears to be real and not real is sometimes a very diffuse area. But I do hear that psychedelic substances as well have injured a lot of people and caused, in some cases, irreversible damage, psychological, emotional, and physical. And so, I definitely don't recommend it because I think it can be damaging and not necessarily lead in the right way. But I certainly don't deny that others have experienced some form of help or insight along the way. But I would tend to, and some people would argue with me, of course, but I would tend to caution against going that way. I mean, I don't see a lot of shortcuts really, because even if there's psychedelic experience, it's also impermanent, unsatisfactory, insubstantial, and not self. For some people, I mean, the use these days of microdosing of psychedelics in a psychotherapeutic setting to aid with long-term trauma or psychological illness. There is some good short-term research coming out to support that. But I think that's quite different to the kind of larger dosing outside of a therapeutic context. But anyway, each person needs to sort this one out for themselves. But from the Buddhist perspective, the Buddha didn't recommend engaging intoxicants or alcohol because he saw it as seems to be in most cases as more of a danger than a help. That true insight into reality and release can come quite naturally and in a sustained way through this other path of practice. So they're my thoughts. As I say, I don't deny anyone's personal experience that's been helpful, but that's each for everyone to know for themselves. So we'll finish up here today, people. Thank you so much for joining and for your questions and your comments. I appreciate that very much, and I hope that some of what we've talked about and I've offered has been helpful for you. So I believe our next session, we may have to be in 4 weeks because we're away for a bit, and it'll be Jayasara, I think, in 4 weeks' time, coming to do the next live stream. So in the meantime, take very good care of yourselves and everyone around you. Be well, be happy. But if you're not well and not happy, embrace that too in the moment. So send you all my love and see you again soon. Bye for now.